Welcome to Off Panel. Yo everybody, welcome to Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and this episode continues the show's coverage of the story behind Image Comics. As you may have seen, I wrote a piece for The Ringer on Image's 25th anniversary, and to get the story, I talked with some of the 7 founders of Image. So to show my work and highlight the stories behind Image, I'm going to run those interviews in full, even if they aren't going to be typical off-panel interviews. It continues with Erik Larsen, the artist of The Amazing Spider-Man at the time who became a founder and partner at Image Comics, as well as the person behind Savage Dragon. Let's dive into it, shall we? Where I wanted to start was the beginning, because I'm curious, when did you first get involved with the plan to leave Marvel and start up, Image?
I was one of, the thing is, here's the thing. I have been told this story so many times that I believe it, but I don't actually remember the real event having taken place. Mm-hmm. Apparently, me, Jim Valentino, and Rob Liefeld had gone out to dinner with Dave Albrecht, who was in some kind of editorial capacity over at Malibu Comics.
Right.
Rob was entertaining the idea of seeing if he could bring the audience who was reading his stuff at Marvel someplace else, just to see, wait, if I did another book somewhere, would the audience go?
Right.
So he asked Dave, hey, if I wanted to publish a book with you guys, would you publish it? And Dave said, or reportedly said, sure, I'd publish a book by any of you guys. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the germ of the beginning of how this all came together. Mm-hmm. Was just that notion of, hey, this guy's willing to do this. And Rob just kind of going, yeah, I kind of want to experiment and see how this goes. Then there was he took out an ad in the Comics Buyer's Guide, which was kind of a deal at that point. Mm-hmm. And it was for a book called Exterminators, I believe.
Yeah.
And Marvel kind of flipped the fuck out. And kind of the thought was, that was a bad idea. And that basically on their part, because he could kind of see the blood in the water, and he could kind of feel like, wow, these guys are really scared shitless that this is going to happen. Mm-hmm. Something like this could happen. And so at that point, I think he felt a little bit empowered by that.
Yeah.
And it became, well, let's just do this and see how this goes. Mm-hmm. I don't know that all of us were like, we're taking off and we're leaving you guys forever.
Right.
Because some had other work. Some thought that they were going to continue doing the stuff they were doing in some capacity. And then it was more of a reaction to how they reacted to us and making any kind of announcement or making any kind of move, which ultimately led to us just kind of going, yeah, all right, well, I guess we're leaving.
Yeah. It's kind of like them responding the way that they did kind of made you guys realize maybe this would work.
Yeah, and it kind of did get us to dig in a bit more than probably were. I mean, initially we all kind of said that we were going to do miniseries, except for Todd. Todd was kind of all in, mm-hmm. but the rest of us were just kind of coming into this going, well, all right, I'll do a few issues and see how this works. Mm-hmm. And then it worked.
Yeah. So what was the appeal to you of striking out on your own and kind of, I mean, the dragon was something you had been developing since you were a kid, basically. Like,
yeah. Well, and it was something that I didn't want to be giving away to somebody else either,
So
So
was it some? Did it kind of come down to ownership for you? Is that why?
yeah, really, for me, it was entirely that.
Mhm.
It was just being able to control your destiny and all that stuff. I remember at one point Keith Giffen was talking to some editor over at DC, and he had something that he wanted Lobo to be doing, and the editor said, "No, no, 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 Lobo would never do that." And he was going, "I invented Lobo. I'm the guy who knows what he would and wouldn't do." And just the idea that I could be giving somebody else my character and have that happen just was
Hmm.
like, I don't think I'm down for that. That doesn't sound so cool.
That is, I mean, that's hilarious. I mean, that's, I mean, like you said, Keith invented or he created Lobo. I mean, like it's
Yeah,
fascinating that they would be like, we know this better than you do. I mean, it probably like if it was back then, it was probably towards the beginning of Lobo, so it's not even like other people had touched on Lobo and they were guarding his like sanctity as a character. It was just they thought they knew better, basically.
yeah.
That's
Well,
fascinating.
yeah,
Do you feel so? One thing I think is interesting about looking back on that moment because, or is creator owned wasn't a new thing. Like Will Eisner and like
yeah,
the
and
ElfQuest.
even going back much farther than that, Simon and Kirby owned their own stuff. Yeah, I guess Will Eisner may have been the first. It's fairly early on that he
Yeah.
was owning the spirit and being able to do stuff like that.
And then like you obviously have like Dave Sim and you have like
Yeah,
the
you got Dave
ElfQuest.
Stim. You had First Comics, and you had other people who had done something that was relatively successful. What had not happened before is the top guys walking off the top books at the height of their popularity and starting their own company.
Right. That's what I was going to ask about. Is do you think Image, because there've never been a creator-owned success to this degree before, or do you think
Yeah.
that Image would have been as successful if it hadn't been for you guys kind of forming this super creator Voltron type thing that like combined all of you guys who are at the top of comics and having I don't know. I mean, it really expands the scale and the scope of what you were doing. If it was just one, I don't know if it would have been as huge as it was. But
Oh,
instead,
I'm
it was
sure it
like all
wouldn't
of you
have been
guys.
as huge initially. Who knows later on?
Right.
But I do think there does get to be something of a I want to be part of this legendary thing,
Hmm.
which is, I mean, that's a real draw. People go, I want to be an Image guy. I want to be one of those people who does their thing. And we've also got just this really great deal that we give people,
Hmm.
so it's fairly appealing.
Yeah, and that was one thing I was curious about, and I talked to Jim earlier, so I have an insight into it. But I'm curious, like when you guys were first starting, was it always the intent for you guys to offer this deal to other creators, or was that
Yeah,
something? It was.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that was really, we wanted to create the kind of company that we would want to work for,
hmm.
basically, and that's definitely a part of it. We're not going to own part of your stuff, and we're going to just stay out and let you do what you want to do, and we're not going to be interfering with any of this. It's all part of the package.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that like right now you're kind of seeing. I talked to Jonathan Hickman for this, and he was talking about how when he was, I'm trying to remember, he was like going in college when Image first launched, and he was saying about how it was such a big deal for him, and now he's like doing his own thing here. He was like inspired. He was like a child of Image in many ways, and it's fascinating to see how like the people who grew up on Image are kind of now like the people who are publishing or who are releasing a lot of the biggest books at Image. You have people like Robert Kirkman, and you have people like Scotty Young, and you have people like Jonathan Hickman, and it's really interesting to see how that has progressed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you feel like the drive to own your own work is just kind of a natural progression of working within I would say in the comic industry, but it's really any art form really. Do you feel like that's
yeah.
a natural progression?
Sure, sure, and really, who doesn't want that?
Right.
you know, you mean there's not going to be somebody telling me what to do? Okay. I mean, and, who's sitting there going, no, that would be terrible. I need somebody to tell me how to do my own stuff. No.
So I want to talk about Savage Dragon because growing up, of all the books, Savage Dragon was the one that I liked the most. I always loved it, and I always like really enjoyed the stories, and I loved your art. And I'm curious, when you started it in 1992, I mean, obviously it started as a miniseries, but did you think it could be something you'd be doing as long as you have done it?
Certainly that was the hope.
Yeah.
I did start it with that thing. It actually was one of those that I kind of wasn't initially gonna do because I had kind of told myself early on, if you ever start doing Savage Dragon as a book, that's the rest of your career. You're just going to be doing that for the rest of your life. Yeah. And I was like, well, I don't know if I want to start the rest of my life now. So initially I was going to do Super Patriot, and then it was like, fuck it. Let me just do Savage Dragon. I want to do that more anyway.
Yeah, that's amazing. You always like envisioned it as this like. Well, I mean, it makes sense. It was like something you created when you were a kid, so it makes sense.
Yeah,
that it would...
and I had an idea of what I wanted to do with it and what I wanted to say and where I wanted it to go. There was a lot of stuff that came along with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, do it. See how long you can make this last, and it's done all right. So
yeah.
I'm pretty happy with how things have been going.
Is it? I think it is the highest numbered Image comic, isn't it? Actually, at this point, it might be the highest numbered anything comic.
Spawn is higher.
Oh, Spawn is higher?
Spawn is higher, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because Todd's worked with a lot of different people over the years, and he was able to maintain a more regular schedule, whereas I have fallen off at times.
Well, and it is kind of, and when I say your baby, I mean really it is your baby. You kind of do everything on it.
Yeah, that's part of the problem.
Well, you were publisher from what? It was 2004 to 2008, and was.
I'm gonna take your word on that.
Okay, according to the internet, which may or may not be true.
I always have to look it up whenever anybody asks. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, yes.
That's one of the funny things is like you look on. I've been researching the history of Image and doing all this reading and everything like that, and it's really kind of hard to nail down some of the specific dates back then. Like it seems like February 1st was when you and the crew met up with at Mark Silvestri's house in Malibu and like started kind of formulating everything, and then it seems like according to Sean Howe's Marvel Comics The Untold Story, it sounds like February 19th was when you guys kind of revealed it all. And it is kind of fascinating how it seems like, according to the internet, the history is a very flexible thing because there's nothing concrete out there as to when all this stuff actually happened, which you would think the internet would be better at.
Yeah, but they weren't. It's all in retrospect because this stuff matters now.
Right.
People weren't thinking at that point, oh, this is going to matter. We're making history here. We got to write down all the dates and keep track of all this nonsense. It was just, you're living your life and doing what you do.
Yeah, I mean, you guys probably had a hard time. I mean, not that you didn't, because it sounds like you always envisioned that other creators would come in and everything like that. But it would be hard to like focus anything on anything besides the project at hand. Like you were working on Savage Dragon, you were working your ass off on it. It's like hard to focus on everything
else. I got married the same time. It's like right at the same time. I finished up my first issue, then I got married, then I went on my honeymoon, then my second issue was really late. Mm-hmm. And so it was a kind of a hectic time. I also quit doing my high-paying Marvel gig right as I bought a house. So it's like, so I was really like fairly tapped in terms of just everything. And if this Image thing hadn't panned out, it would be like, well, okay, time to rethink.
Well, and that was one of the things that was amazing. Is like you guys, I mean, given where you were, despite the fact that it sounds like Marvel in particular was not super enthused with you guys for doing it, I'm sure you guys had opportunities to go back if you really wanted.
Yeah, but I'm sure that the books that we left, they wouldn't just kick everybody that off those.
Sure.
I just don't imagine. I think there would be some kind of a punishment, maybe too strong a word, but where you don't walk off of Spider-Man and come back and be given Spider-Man. I think we would all be, drawing whatever, Mad Balls or something. And they had some crappy books back then, right? Just be like, hey, you want to do this? All right.
Now I'm trying to think if Mad Balls was actually a thing. I hope it was.
It actually was a thing.
Oh my God. That's amazing. So, speaking of the temperature back then, obviously you were crazy busy. You had the house, you had everything else like that. But I'm sure you had a pretty good insight into what the general tenor of response was. Like, do you remember what the general response was to you guys making this deal and moving over and starting your own thing? Was it a mix of happiness or like, people who were excited for the idea of you guys doing this, and then a lot of people who were extremely unhappy with you? Or was it mostly on the latter side?
It was from fans. It was almost entirely positive.
Mm-hmm.
There is a small handful of people who didn't really understand the world at all, and so it was like, you guys are traitors for leaving your Marvel books. It's like, really? That's how that works? Because from the way we've been looking at it, people leave and go back and forth from one company to the next all the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's just the way things work. Are you a traitor that you're working at I'm flipping burgers at McDonald's now instead of Burger King? You traitor. Like, really? That's how that works? Okay, that's interesting.
But then for the industry, I heard that, for example, like Bob Harris was not super excited.
Yeah,
I guess he was excited, just not in a positive
way. He's not super excited. And I think, guys having to suddenly scramble to find people to do work, they're going to be kind of bummed about it. It's like, we had guys who were doing this stuff and people liked those guys, and now we don't have them anymore. Mm-hmm. So that part's like, that part's not so awesome for them, but
no,
whatever,
Yeah.
What can I say?
I wanted to ask about Eric Stevenson. He was, when you were publisher, he was like the second in command. Actually, I think he was second in command when Jim was the publisher too. And he's been with Image for a very long time. How important to the growth of Image do you feel he's been since he took over as publisher?
He's been very, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, I mean, he's helped things change a lot, and he's helped things grow a lot, and he's gone out and done some awesome things. So, yeah, no complaints for me there.
Yeah. It does kind of seem that since he took over, not that it wasn't necessarily the case before, but especially since he took over, that there's been more and more established and like top level creators have decided to publish their comics Image. Why do you think that's the case? Do you think it's just like the cycle basically taking place where creators realize that they have this opportunity and that they can create their own books and make more money, and control their own destiny, or do you think it's just something else?
I just think it's a matter of people seeing that it works.
Yeah.
That you can look at it and go, oh, wait a minute. Suddenly there's this Robert Kirkman, and he's got a TV show, and things are wonderful for him, and he didn't seem to be getting screwed over. And really, the biggest recruiting tool by far are creators who come over and do work.
Right.
So, they are sitting there talking to their fellow creators and going, come over, man. This is great. And so that's really been the major one is those guys making those calls and telling other people, hey, the water is warm.
Yeah, it's kind of like the post-con bars are almost like where you guys go to recruit, not intentionally. It's just kind of like where creators talk, and it's where they're having conversations about like, wow, like this is doing great for me. You should try out something. You should bring your idea here or something like that. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool though.
It totally is. I was going to say, or I was going to ask about Robert because, obviously he's been a very big deal. And he became the first partner that wasn't a founder in 2008. What made Robert a good fit for Image and in that role overall? Like, because, it was a big deal getting a new partner.
He just, I don't know. I mean, he's always been very very what's the word I'm even looking for? I'm trying to say faithful, but that's not really the word. But he's been sort of this constant Image Comics cheerleader. He has been at Image for as soon as he could be at Image. Mm-hmm. And he's been out there banging the drum a whole hell of a lot. And it just sort of seemed like, what, this guy's been here. He's been doing stuff for a long time. He does good work. People like him. We like him as a group. I think more than anything it was just, hey, we all get along and like this guy and want this guy to be part of this company, and that's kind of where things, how things kind of work, mm-hmm. In that to a degree at least.
Yeah, he really does seem like an evangelist for the company, and and like I mean, you look at something like the Kirkman Manifesto, which is like I always think is like the most intense name for something that like for what it is and everything like that, but. It does kind of seem like this firebrand moment that may have inspired a lot of creators to, aspire to do their own comics. Yeah. And it's like he's kind of progressing, not to make it sound like you guys are some sort of religion or something like that, but he's continuing the message that you guys kicked off in 1992 in many ways.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wish everybody was as commercial as he was. And I mean for their benefit, not for ours. But it's like some people's commercial instincts are not what they are not that strong. It's mm-hmm. like if you're sitting there going, I'm going to do this book and my logo is going to be unpronounceable, unreadable, and hidden. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, really? This doesn't seem like the good idea. Oh no, but all my covers are going to be photo covers of goats. Your selling point is your art. Why are you doing photo covers of goats? That doesn't make any sense. No, it'll be really cool. It'll be different from everything else on the rack.
It is interesting how you look at people like Robert, you look at people like Mark Miller, like those are two guys who have like crazy good business instincts. And it's like sometimes it seems like people vilify them to a certain degree for having that, like, oh, you can't mix commerce and art. And I'm like, commerce and art are like crazy intermingled. Like it's important, especially in comics.
Well, that's what you're trying to do. Ultimately, you're trying to sell a product of some sort, as crass as that sounds. Mm-hmm. And it's like, to some degree, you do need to be doing commercial art. It is commercial art to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
No, and that you're selling, it's like I'm selling something. I'm making a product. Hopefully you like it. If not, well, there's plenty of other things that are out there. It's not all the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you would have been working on Savage Dragon for 25 years and just like filing the pages away for no one to ever read. You're like, that was good. That makes me happy. Like, I think that would have been kind of counterproductive to your life if you went that direction.
Yeah. I mean, you do want to be able to do what you want to do. At the same time, there do have to be some kind of small considerations when you're taking an audience into account. It's like I can't just go, I want to do an issue where it's all the same panel over and over again, and they're all sitting in a boat fishing. It's like, yeah, I mean, you can try that. But I'm guessing it's not going to work more than once.
Mm-hmm.
And, you just can't do certain things for very long without your audience just going, all right, that's enough of that.
Do you think that kind of more business-centric mentality? That's I don't mean to sully it or anything like that, but do you think that kind of mentality was something that unified you guys when you first started? Was that something you guys kind of all had?
I don't know that was the case so much. I think I certainly don't think that we talked about, okay, let's make this as commercial as humanly possible. I just think that was where our interest lied. We really did want to do the kind of books that we did.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just being crass and commercial. It was like, this is the character I grew up with as a kid. This is a character that I did a long time ago. And there were a few of us that was the case with. Todd had created Spawn when he was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Liefeld had created a bunch of the Youngblood characters years before he was really doing any of this stuff. So I'm not completely on my own in that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, this is just stuff people want to do. It wasn't, let's capitalize on superheroes or whatever. It was, no, we actually like superheroes. Mm-hmm. We want to do more superheroes because that was what we were fond of. And then, the new group of people who are doing stuff, they may not feel that way. And so they're going to bring something else to the table, and that's fine too.
Yeah. They're just working on what they've connected with. I mean,
yeah.
You guys grew up during a time when superheroes were kind of, they were pretty much everything. I mean, Marvel and DC.
Yeah, that's the case. They were pretty much the whole field, and now they don't have to be. So, I mean, that's awesome for all those people who, for years and years and years, were complaining about comics not being very diverse and there not being something for every audience. Now there really is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about, Image today versus when it first started. Do you feel like Image's role in the industry today is different than when it first started, or do you think it hasn't really changed much, at all?
Yeah, I think it is kind of the same. I think people get more of a sense that, I can do anything really means I can do anything than they used to. I think when Image started off, there weren't a lot of people coming to this company going, I want to do something that's completely self-contained and doesn't connect with any of you guys' stuff, and also screw you guys. It really wasn't that case. It was, hey, these guys are all playing in this playground. They seem to be having a good time. I want to be part of that same playground. Mm-hmm. And that's changed. That's very different than it had been at that point. That's awesome. That's great.
Do you think that, and it really seems like that moment, like, when you guys were first starting, was kind of a perfect recipe for you to be able to do something like this. Do you think that something like Image could ever happen again, or is it really of that moment?
Well, it would have to be. It would have to be. You'd have to have those kind of creators, and the way that this industry is right now. It doesn't really lend itself to that kind of thing so much.
Right.
If you were to even try and pick, well, who would the top 6 guys be walking off the top 6 books? Well, some of them are already at Image.
Yeah.
And then most of the names that are kind of the names that people respond to right now are writers And I don't know that those guys would be the guys that everybody would be marching for, and some of them have already done the creator-owned stuff. So it's like, okay, so you're going to go do something else somewhere else? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
Say that was one thing that I thought was really interesting about when you guys started. I don't know if it would have worked as well if like let's say it was 1992 and you took like the top 6 writers of the time and it was Chris Claremont and it was God, I don't even know who else I would pick for the top 6 writers of the time.
Yeah, it would have been tough, because
Yeah,
it would have been like Claremont and Scott Lobdell and Baby Nicieza and Marv Wolfman, maybe?
yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you'd have to be looking all around the field. I mean, Walt Simonson, but he was writing and drawing.
Yeah, I just don't know if writers would have had the same heat. It just seemed like it. I don't know. Like it's almost like art centric kind of just made more sense for that type of thing because people.
Yeah, it definitely did.
Yeah,
And plus we had just come off of this thing of Spider-Man #1, and then X-Force #1, and now X-Men #1. So that there's that role of this is a huge selling comic, then this is a big selling comic, then this was a big selling comic, and you can just kind of snowball off of that into now these guys are going and doing something somewhere else and coming up with something entirely new.
mm-hmm.
And that became, I got to see this. I got to be part of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that you can really do that with a writer, because they have to be paired with an artist, or who cares?
Yeah,
If they're paired with somebody terrible, the audience doesn't respond. So they have to choose wisely.
that's one thing I think is really interesting is, and if I could be wrong about this, and you would be the person who would know, but I think as it stands, like Image doesn't like accept pitches unless there's art with it, and that makes total sense because it's kind of hard to imagine whether or not a book could work without having the artistic vision behind it. If you have like the best concept ever and I was drawing it, you would be totally screwed. And
Yeah,
so
well, there are people who will come to us and can sell us a book without an artist attached, but those are very, very, very rare. And it's almost always somebody who has a serious track record of, it's like, I think probably Brian K. Vaughan could pull that off and just say, I'm going to do a book. I want to do it about this, and I'll find a guy. And we would be like, sure. Yeah, that sounds awesome. I hope they have a pulse. That would be really.
That's awesome.
And which is not to disregard any artist he is working with at all, but at this point he has a very proven track record of being able to draw an audience.
Right. And even beyond that, it's not like he's ever like presented himself as somebody who's like, I'm just going to get a hobo to draw this because
I mean there's these guys, a lot of them, they have some commercial sense, and that's why they are what they are.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't think Mark Miller's going to be like, I think maybe my neighbor ought to draw this one. It's like, what? No, that's terrible.
That's a situation where the partners would advise him against that, perhaps.
It's like, well, I mean, some of this stuff does end up being, okay, your call, buddy. And there does get to be a certain amount of that, but
right.
you want to try and talk somebody off that ledge if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last question I have for you is, like one of the only things that Image really owns is the logo itself, the Image Eye.
Yeah.
What was it? God, it was Hank Canals that did that, wasn't it?
It was Hank Canals with Rob Liefeld kind of going over the initial design, I believe.
Okay. So, that is kind of Image's brand. It's all of it like manifested into this one eye. What do you think the Image eye stands for today? What do you think it means today, I guess? I know that's a very dramatic question.
Yeah, it's a very. I mean, I don't know. Whatever. So it is whatever you want it to be, really.
Yeah.
To me, it's just it's creator-owned comics. It's singular vision from creators. This is going to be the stuff that these guys want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome.
Yeah, I guess in some ways, like you were saying, it really kind of depends on who it is, because like Image really does publish comics that could be for anybody, and they could be from anybody really, because maybe get a blind submission from X person, and next thing you know, they're like,
Well, that has happened more than a few times.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Jonathan Hickman sent his thing in, and that was completely blind. There was no friend contacting us saying, "Hey, check this out," or anything like that. That was just a guy deciding, "Hey, I want to do this," and showing us what he wanted to do, and us going, "Sure, yeah, let's do this."
Mm-hmm.
And that worked out really well. And the same thing with the Luna brothers. Those guys were just out of the blue.
Yeah.
They had, it's like, okay, sometimes this works,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't always work,
Yeah, but I mean, that's why you guys got to make the choices you do, and it seems to be working out quite well for you. But hey, Erik, thank you so much for chatting with me. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you are busy.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this special episode of Off Panel with Erik Larsen telling the history of Image Comics. You can find Erik on Twitter at @ErikJLarsen, and you can find the article on the history of Image that this interview led to at The Ringer. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher, and give the show a rating and review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen, as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.